Welcome back, my dear friends. Very good morning or an evening or an afternoon to all of you. Hope all of you are fine. So, continuing the total quality management number 1 course, I am Raghunandan Sengupta from IME department, IIT Kanpur. So, this is lecture number 9. So, we are, if you remember, we are discussing the DuPont case. So, in after the DuPont case, if you remember, so there was a need to improve. So, the team proposed a digital scanning for the documents. So, obviously to keep in track what things were planned, how things could be implemented with least error or a minimization error. Obviously, you cannot make error as 0, there would be variances, and as you know that we did discuss the normal distribution and how the normal distribution is an integral part of total quality management and statistical process control. The solution rejected earlier was because of the higher cost. So, obviously, cost is an important factor which comes into the play in the total quality management, because as you know, for any implementation of any project, whether it is a company, whether it is a government project, whether it is basically a semi government work, whatever you are doing on the shop floor, trying to deliver goods to your customers or trying to deliver different type of services, it be it a bank, a restaurant, an airline or railways, whatever, there are issues that your cost concern is one of the important factor based on which you will take the decision. So, in order to improve, DuPont also consider actual loss in terms of errors. So, what were the effect of the errors? And they were identified in order to basically take into consideration that the errors, as they increased, obviously they had a huge amount of effect on the overall variance and the actual cost structure. So, it may be cost structure increase, it can be variance in the work environment increase, it can be basically quality being affected, which the products or the goods or even the services which are being rendered to the customers. Customers need not be the outside one also, it can be inside your company. You as a design team are trying to pass on your products of the design to your customers who are on the shop floor, or say for example, you are the purchase manager and you are trying to basically purchase different type of goods, considering you are trying to manufacture a motor, an electrical motor or a fan or a diesel pump set or a transformer. So, there would be different items required, it can be iron ore, it can be steel or different type of laminations, copper, so on and so forth, it can be different type of fuses, circuit breakers. So, obviously, if the quality is lacking, it affects your customers, as I said, who can be down the stream, your own colleagues in the factory. And in order to implement this overall scheme, DuPont also worked with the IT team to identify the appropriate system such that the reporting and the set of information which was available to all the players in the whole process of delivering goods or services. Everybody was aware where the goods were, at what stage they were, what was the overall problem they were facing, if at all. So, things could be rectified on an urgent basis or on immediate basis. So, obviously, once you improve, you need to control that, because as you know, if you keep a system as it is, obviously the overall entropy. So, entropy, I am using the word very philosophically, in the sense entropy is the overall variance or overall disturbance which you have in a system. So, that increases, and just for the information for many people who may have a engineering background. So, entropy is basically something very core or fundamental to mechanical and civil engineering. Basically, it comes from the concept of thermodynamics. So, if entropy or the variance of the overall system increases, so it needs to be controlled. So, for control, there was a design of new system to automatically track and report the estimated cost per document and how the cost could be reduced, whether you need to take a paper printer or whether you need to basically have the e-copy uploaded and people can look and do the needful. The system also tracked the performance of other critical quality things or so called areas where work was done, and reported the information to the user of the process. So, obviously, user we would only mean the people who are using it, but it does not mean that we are the only people who are getting the benefit or trying to do the work, because whatever work we do, the outputs of say for example, shop floor 1 becomes the input of shop floor 2. And obviously, if there are some errors in the shop floor or the processing unit or the department or the set of persons who are supplying the goods, the services to shop floor 1, shop floor I am using in a very generic term. So, if there are errors there, so it should be so called visible, so called they should be aware of these things. So, things can be improved accordingly, obviously scientifically. So, once you identify, you control them, and for control, reporting items, how you implement the system using different type of mathematical tools should be remembered. And obviously, if there are errors, you need an explanation. So, why the errors occurred, what are the reasons, are the errors controllable, or the errors are so called white noise or the effects which are coming from the environment. Now, if say for example, you are manufacturing some goods in a place where humidity is very high, so obviously humidity would be affected. It is not that humidity is being created by the people who are working there. So, obviously, there would be white noise. If there is huge amount of dust, if there is huge amount of noise, if there is huge amount of pollution. So, all these things should be taken care of. Or say for example, the machine which you are working on is very old. So, whether you need to change the machine or whether the quality control check for the machines working should be done. So, all these things are so called explanations which you need to understand in order to have a overall view of how the control has been done and how the improvement can be taken care of. So, explanation about how the new system worked and necessary training need to be provided, and they were provided. So, say for example, if I have a new machine and the worker is not aware of how the new machine should be worked on or how it should be operated, obviously it will affect the overall quality of the products or the goods which are coming out. So, he or she or the worker needs to be trained. Training can be on the machine, training can be on the philosophy how you work, training can be on the raw materials, how you process the raw materials. Say for example, you are working on the accounting part. So, if the accountant or the chartered or the cost or the person who is manning the overall accounting process is not aware of the new rules and regulations, he or she should be trained such that things can be tied up in its overall plan in order that control and improvement can be done. A second example, so we will consider that can be on improving the time of delivery. So, if you are aware that in say for example, the supply chain. So, in supply chain, I as a distributor, I as a manufacturer, I make products, deliver it to the distributor, and the distributor further on basically delivers the products through either trucks or buses or say for example, train or flight, whatever it is, it delivers to the retailers, and the retailers basically then further on as the customer needs it, customer comes and buys it, or whatever the mode of operation of those products are, they are delivered. Now, whenever it is required, say for example, if I am in the goods manufacturing and I am manufacturing such goods which are on high demand during the winters, maybe it is warm clothes, maybe it is a heater, or in the summers things are needed or in demand are say for example, the air conditioner, the fridges, the fans, just to give you an example. So, the problem would be that there would be problems that goods are not delivered on time. So, if there is a not delivered on time and if the customers have already ordered that, so there is a loss of face because you are not able to deliver the products as on time as needed. Or say for example, if goods which have been delivered, they face a problem. So, you need to have a good customer service office or a customer care center which are able to take care of the difficulties. Difficulties may be say for example, the goods are not delivered on time, goods are defective, goods need to be repaired or the wrong goods were supplied. Consider this, like Amazon is supplying goods, but if there is an error that if X object was ordered, like X design of clothes were ordered and if the Y was delivered actually, so obviously there is a mismatch. So, that has to be basically taken care of and right on time. So, on time deliveries were say for example, for this company were 85% instead of the desired target of 100%. So, say for example, if I am delivering goods, so obviously the customer would want the delivery of the goods to be happen on time, and if it is not, there is a problem. So, considered in the hypothetical company, if 85% of the goods were delivered on time instead of 100, so obviously there are some problems which need to be taken into consideration. And customer penalty obviously would be there, because if I am a customer and I am not getting my products delivered for which I have already made the payment, obviously there would be litigations. People will go to the court, people will go to the consumer court and file cases, people will ring up my company where I am delivering goods and basically ask questions why the problem is happening. There would be loss of face, there would be loss of customer satisfaction. So, all this would basically affect the overall reputation of the company which is basically manufacturing and delivering the goods. Customer concern regarding capability and schedule adherence was basically not met. So, what you need to do as from the company point of view is basically deliver the product right on time as needed, depending on the quality and what is its specificity is. Like if I specify, as I said, I want X type of item, but if I am delivered Y type of items, it does not meet my purposes. Like I order a trousers for men, if I get a ladies garment, so obviously there is a mismatch. Or say for example, if I order in a restaurant, I am ordering some food which should be made, which should be made, say for example, from a certain type of vegetables, and if I get a different type of a product or a food, obviously there is a mismatch, and that is one. Another would be, say for example, I get the right food, but I have to wait very long in the queue for getting the items in a medical shop. So, obviously that is also a problem, because I am not getting the medicines or not getting the services right on time. So, you should define the objective, which is 100% on time delivery, and you should also maintain a satisfied level of customer satisfaction. So, obviously it does not mean that you are able to deliver, like as in products there would be variances for delivery of goods. So, obviously you would need to basically minimize it to the maximum possible extent. Like as I was talking about the supply chain, you as a customer, you pick up the phone, order goods. So, obviously it means that the moment you order the goods, they do not arrive. So, obviously there is a lead time. So, for you as a company, you should see that lead time would definitely vary, it will have some distribution. So, what you should be more concerned about is the lead time variance is as low as possible, and as the time of deliverance based on the call which you are getting to deliver the goods should be as low as possible. So, obviously it may not be possible to deliver instantaneously, but you will try to basically minimize the time as well as the overall variances or the dispersion of the time variances which would be there in trying to deliver the products. So, obviously you will try to basically measure. So, for the measures, as in the second example it states, the contractual lead time for the delivery of the tools was basically 8 weeks. So, if you remember, I did mention few seconds back the concept of lead time. So, it was basically 8 weeks. The quality control or the basically the overall the company's deliverance was for this process was to basically meet the target of the contractual lead time, which was basically 8 weeks. And certain historical data was available. So, obviously we look into the historical data, where is the problem occurring? Is it that we are not able to process the payment which the customer gives? So, based on the fact that you as a company will only act once you get the payment. So, if there is a payment problem happening between the customer and your company, or is it the bank which is creating a problem, you should basically check, or the company would as is being mentioned here in the discussion, I have not mentioned the name. So, they would look into the fact whether there was problem in the delivery of the money, because you will only act based on the point that once you get the money you will act. Or is it that, say for example, the specification which was mentioned by the customers, you are not able to understand that, or maybe that you thought that you would be able to deliver, but that specific order which was placed by the customer has some problem, it is very difficult to manufacture, it is very difficult to design it. So, if that is the case, you should basically take into actions what were the problems which you faced, or was it that you over committed based on the fact that you want to have a good business. So, all these things if you are there, you basically need to take a very rational decision on those practical facts. And this would only be available from the historical data, both on the customer demand, both on the delivery of the product, both on the cost price of the raw materials based on which you are doing. So, say for example, it may be that the cost price of the raw materials based on which you are going to manufacture different items which are demanded by the customers, which are ordered by the customers, they are fluctuating very high. So, if they are fluctuating obviously very high, so you would basically try to purchase them when the raw material cost is the least. So, if you wait too long, obviously it affects your total commitment which you have made for the customers. So, all these things needs to be understood in this right perspective. As mentioned, I am just mentioning as an example which happen in different practical situations, and for this the bullet points which are very relevant to one example which is there after the DuPont case, I am just discussing as we progress with the course. Now, in the process map, it is not very complicated, but it is a very detailed. So, basically you would have the sales receives the purchase order from the customers, the sales opens the sales order. So, you as a customer, you make a phone call to the company and the company takes the order. So, obviously you have to process the sales order. So, once the sales opens the sales order, then if it is a project, it goes to the project engineer. So, I am following the main heading of the bullet points which are shown on the slide here. So, the project engineer confirms the order of the configuration with the customers has asked. So, it may be that the customer demands such a product which you may not be able to deliver. So, obviously you should basically be aware of that, take a stock of the situation and then commit accordingly, which are deliverable and actually probable things which you can make and deliver to the customers. It may be goods, it may be services, whatever it is. So, in the project engineer fits out the internal order form, and based on that the sale processes the internal order form and completes the internal sales of the entity. Then the sales signs the approval for the account manager, because obviously there are financial implications. So, if the customer wants a certain product at a price X, and if the even if it is implementable, that means the product can be designed, but if the input cost is very high, obviously you have to take a rational decision based on that, for which you need the overall approval, overall analysis from the accounts or the finance person. The sale forwards the, so I am coming to the second column. The sale forwards the sales order to the purchasing team. The purchasing receives the order, acknowledges it, purchase updates the project engineer. So, just to give you a hint, the overall diagram which is there in front of you in this slide gives you a so called flow process of how the overall order from the customer till he or she gets that order is being said. So, obviously there may be different nuances, different type of flow process happening for different type of industry. It can be for say for example, for a hotel industry or a restaurant industry, it will be different. It may be say for example, for the airline industry, it would have a different implication. It may be say for example, for goods manufacturing, actual mechanical goods, electrical goods, engineering goods manufacturing and delivery, it would have a different implications. But I am trying to give you as far as possible the general flow starting from the order till the deliverance of the product to the customers. Then it would be the project engineer updates the sales with the schedules and the and the other details. Sales generates the order. The project engineer opens new Gantt chart. Gantt chart, if somebody has the information in the project management case, it basically gives you the way the works would be done and what are the implications of the works, how they are implemented, how they are independent or interdependent on each other, whether the type of work which you do in stage A is dependent and it would have an implication to stage B, and what are the time durations between them. So, they have to be looked into in details. Then the project engineer receives the weekly updates from the supplier, how the work is doing, and depending on the products which are to be delivered or the raw materials which need to be delivered. The project engineer verifies the internal equipment and so on and so forth. The project engineer forwards the buy off report to the customer. Upon receipt of the shipment, approval from the customer, based on that the project engineer instructs the supplier for creating the so called goods or the things. Things means what I am saying is basically the actual product or the services. After shipment were picked up by freight, it is forwarded to the supplier's location. Project engineer forwards the shipping documents to accounts, and accounts receivable generates the invoice for the customer for the payment. So, payment scheme can be 100%, can be on delivery, so on and so forth. So, many of the cases you will see, just for an example, for Amazon or for Flipkart, it would be in Indian context, there are many things which are cash on deliveries. That means, you only make the payment once you get the goods. In other cases, you have to make upfront payment and get those products depending on the availability. So, improving on the time delivery concept would be, you should basically analyze, improve and control. So, what are the points on analysis are: supply quality issues are there, that means the supplier who is supplying the goods or the so called products. It can be purchase order process can be delayed, or the vendor requirements are not met, or the quality of the vendors is an issue. So, you have to take care of this. Delay in the customer configuration also would be there. Say for example, it can be that the customer has a very specific requirements, and once you send it to the vendor or the supplier of the raw materials will supply the goods at your end for you to manufacture the product which you have to supply to the customers, they may be mismatch. Like the customer wants a type of variety of goods which you are not able to deliver, or the commitment from the vendor side is much more than what it can deliver. So, obviously, there would be a mismatch, both it can be both from the customer's end as well as the vendor's end, the supplier's end. It can be, say for example, you have over committed. So, those mismatch have to be taken into consideration. There may be different type of incorrect tool configuration. So, this point I am only talking from the manufacturing concept. So, tool configuration may be, say for example, the jack fixtures, the grinding tool, and all these things are a misfit based on what the customer requirement is. You have to take care of that and basically rectify or analyze where the problem is coming from. Then you need to improve. So, it can be supply quality control improvement is required, it can be improve the internal purchase order, how you can basically purchase the raw materials from the vendor. So, if you are basically having a problem in trying to basically make the payment to the vendor, so obviously it will affect the payment and to the vendor, and the vendor would also delay the product being delivered to your end, which would in the long run basically affect your services or your goods being supplied to the customer. So, you will also try to improve the ordering process with the customer and how it can be streamlined, and once you basically do that, you control and develop a overall flow process and how the processing can be done, starting from the customer's requirement till his or her goods is delivered as at the customer's end. So, for the improved process, I would not go into the details. If you consider the last to last slides where the sets of the flow process was given in blocks, the column 1, column 2, column 3, it is the same thing, but you can improve the whole overall process. So, if you make a comparison, I am not going to go into the details, because I would request, urge and want the participants who are taking this course at least to compare. On a nutshell, this is just an example, there can be variations of the example, to compare the last to last blocks of the flows with this one, which again starts from the sales retrieves the purchases to the last stage, which is in the third column, the accounts receivable, and how the payments are being made by the customer. So, there would be some internal changes, how to improve the system, where the problems are, and then you control how the overall flow process is occurring. So, a variation of this process used for customer focused services like product improvement can be there, product adjustments can be there, or new product development can be done. So, you need to basically define the needs and wants of the customers. So, through the customer review process, the feedbacks, like say for example, when you are delivering some product in the bank, you are giving services, or you are basically trying to sell some product, or you have started a new business and trying to deliver some products, some services, you get a feedback from the customers. So, how fast is it deliverable, schedule which has been promised to the customers, what is the overall way how you handle the purchases and the sales, or whether the time delivery is met for the products to be delivered, or whether the products are immediately available off the shelf at the retailer's end, or whether the actual focus or what the customer wants, based on that whether your product meets the needs. So, say for example, you have delivered a fridge, and if the consumption of electricity of the fridge is very high, or if the cooling of the fridge is not up to the standard, so obviously there is a mismatch. So, you need to basically understand the overall customer's requirement based on what your products can deliver, and then basically take the customer's feedback for that. So, you will measure a process is required to manufacture the product, deliver the services or the products to the customers, and you basically have a set of matrix. The matrix can be some quantitative as well as qualitative points, based on which you assign some score, assign some level of importance on the different deliverable points, based on which you can basically improve your overall quality. So, quality word I am again using in a very generic sense. It can be to do with the finances, it can be to do with the level of competence of your staff who are trying to do the good. It can be, say for example, the overall quality of the raw materials which you are getting. It may be, say for example, level of cleanliness which you have in your factory or in your shop floor or in your restaurant. It can be how courteous your employees are in trying to basically handle with different type of customers. It can be different things. It may be how good your quality of the products are for which they have been designed or manufactured. Then you analyze the results of the manufacturing and the services delivery process, and they are tested by the internal teams. So, other bullet points based on which you can have an analysis of the overall quality improvement can be design. So, in the and other would be verify. So, on the design you will basically check the results of the internal test and they are compared with identified client requirements, because if there is a mismatch in between what the customer wants and what you are trying to deliver, obviously there would be a huge amount of quality issues. So, if the customer wants the X product, even if your product Y is very good, so obviously he or she is not going to buy that. So, if you force somebody to buy your product, obviously they would be mismatched. So, these requirements should be dovetailed depending on what the customer is able to get. So, in case, say for example, if the customer wants certain type of product and if you are not able to deliver, so obviously the overall communication between the customer and the company should be that there should not be any mismatch in their overall analysis and what the customer wants and what the company is able to deliver. So, adjustments as required need to be made. Maybe, say for example, the customer wants the overall error in the dimension of a certain product which it wants to manufacture from your end. It is, say for example, in 1000 microns. But if you are not able to deliver that level of accuracy, you will basically talk with the customer and check what is the technical specification and whether 1000 microns are actually needed. It may be the overall the variance of or the overall change in the dimension may be not that accurate, or they may not be needed to that accuracy level. So, you will basically talk with the customers and check whether a less level of dimensionality or less level of stringentness on the dimensionality is at all required. If it is not, obviously you will talk and basically try to find out what can be the other implications and how they can be met. This met means the customer requirement can be met. So, improved processes are tested and the presented to test customer groups and for the feedback. Then what you need is basically you need to verify the continuous adjustment while the product services is delivered is analyzed and verified. New metrics to track the overall improvement in the quality and the overall customer feedback and satisfaction are studied in details, and then basically you implement that, changing the previous system such that things can be done in much better way. So, other area may be identified which may lead to improvement in the quality, and those should be implemented accordingly as required. So, with this I will basically end the 9th lecture and start with the 10th lecture, where we will continue the discussion of the quality and how it can be implemented, and we will proceed accordingly. And also, as I discussed, we will go more into depth about the quantitative part and solve problems accordingly. Thank you very much and have a nice day.